On October 11, 1975, at 11:30 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, NBC first aired a late-night sketch comedy show called Saturday Night Live. It eventually became a mainstream hit and made household names of Chevy Chase, Dan Aykroyd, John Belushi, Garrett Morris, and Jane Curtin. By 1980, Saturday Night Live reached an all-time rating high of 13.5, but there was trouble on the horizon. By the end of the fifth season, Lorne Michaels, the producer and the original showrunner, was burned out and replaced by Gene Dumanian, who wanted to give the show a fresh start with a new cast and writing staff. But alas, the new cast faced immediate comparison to the old cast and was not received favorably. In March 1981, Dumanian was fired and replaced by Dick Ebersol, the director of late-night programming on NBC since 1975. Ebersol fired the remaining cast except for Joe Piscopo and Eddie Murphy, two relatively unknown comics. The show floundered for a few seasons with middling ratings, although they did get a boost by hiring established actors Billy Crystal and Martin Short. Ebersol was replaced by Michaels in 1985, and once again the show was recast with Anthony Michael Hall, Joan Cusack, and Robert Downey Jr. Once again, the show was not received favorably, and in April 1986, the show faced cancellation. The show was renewed, but Michaels fired most of the cast and hired unknown talent such as Dana Carvey and Phil Hartman instead of established names. But although the show would continue, and there would be some bright spots in these years, it would still flounder. But in 1989, things were starting to look up. Mike Myers, Adam Sandler, and Chris Farley were hired, with David Spade joining the cast in 1990. The show thrived both critically and commercially, and though Saturday Night Live never reached the ratings high it had reached in the late 70s and early 80s, it averaged a 9.2 rating for the 1992 to 93 season, good enough for the fifth highest rating in the show's history. During his time on Saturday Night Live, Farley appeared in the films Wayne's World, Wayne's World 2, Coneheads, Airheads, and had an uncredited role in Billy Madison, which was Adam Sandler's big screen debut as the bus driver. Spade appeared in films as early as 1987 in Police Academy 4, Citizens on Patrol, and during his tenure on Saturday Night Live, he appeared in Light Sleeper, Coneheads, Reality Bites, and PCU. But in the midst of Saturday Night Live's success, Dana Carvey and Phil Hartman left the show, taking a virtual cast of sketch comedy characters with them. Facing budgetary pressures, Michaels fired Chris Farley and Adam Sandler from the show in 1995. Spade left the show in 1996. But if Michaels fired Chris Farley, he also helped launch his movie career. He produced Tommy Boy, written by Bonnie and Terry Turner and directed by Peter Segal, and a vehicle for Farley and Spade. The movie was not a big success. It had a budget of $20 million and grossed $32.7 million, thus making it a financial success, and it received mixed reviews. Still, I'm watching it 28 years later, and that's something. Given the criteria used to gauge cult successes, I guess you could say that Tommy Boy was a cult success, not making a lot of money at the box office, but making significant money in video rentals and purchases. Maybe you had to be there, but I get a special feeling whenever I watch this movie.
Their partnership
It's a clip, Bob. Are you sure?
was created in the factory.
Promise you'll look after Tommy Boy here till he gets his feet wet.
Time out. Bad idea.
Forged on the interstate
Ugh, I can actually hear you getting fatter.
and road tested all the way to Detroit. Chris Farley,
The salesman has left the building.
David Spade, Tommy Boy.
It looks real.
Rated PG-13. Starts Friday, March 31st at
In order to qualify Tommy Boy as a low-budget review, the cost of the media has to be less than or equal to $13.91. There will be more about the criteria used to define the set of movies for the series in a future video. But for now, take my word for it that the cost has to be less than or equal to $13.91. DVDs were not introduced until 1997, so the initial video release of Tommy Boy would be on videotape and Laserdisc. It was first released on these formats on October 10th, 1995, which is one day short of the 20th anniversary of the first airing of Saturday Night Live. At some point, the price of the Tommy Boy DVD came down in price. I remember buying it at Walmart in 2010 for about $5. Back then, I remember seeing DVDs featuring both Tommy Boy and Black Sheep for not much more. So I looked on Amazon and saw the Blu-ray version for $8.99. But alas, the Holy Schnike Edition was only $9.99, which is well short of $13.91. So I bought the Holy Schnike Edition. I want to give a technical review of the Tommy Boy DVD. The resolution of the movie is 720 horizontal pixels by 480 lines, encoded as MPEG 1/2 video. So by today's standards, it's not really high definition. I guess it's technically high definition because anything greater than 640 horizontal pixels by 480 lines is high definition, but not really any HDTV formats, and that would be 1,280 horizontal pixels by 720 lines, or 1,920 horizontal pixels by 1,080 lines, interlaced or progressive. It's not any of those. Thus, watching the DVD was enjoyable, although not particularly impressive. I'm guessing that Tommy Boy was recorded on film, if for no other reason than you didn't see things being recorded digitally until the late 1990s. So I guess it could be rescanned at a higher resolution. So maybe I should buy the Blu-ray version of this disc. I'm not particularly curious about it. The DVDs have lower resolution, but it only has 40-bit encryption. So you could break the encryption easily on a DVD. As seen with the DCSS program, you could brute force DVD encryption in 1999 in a high-end computer in 24 hours. You could brute force it within seconds on a modern computer, so it's very easily broken. On the other hand, Blu-rays, higher resolution, but they kind of went crazy with the encryption. But you can potentially get much higher resolutions. 1,920 by 1080 is kind of like was one step, and now they've gone in further steps to like 4K, 5K, 8K. But yeah, I'm not particularly curious about the Blu-ray format, so I'm pretty much happy with, or at least complacent with the DVD format at this time. When forced to view a comedy like Tommy Boy through a critical lens, I'm faced with a dilemma. There are excellent movies that I have seen, such as Citizen Kane, The Bicycle Thief, and The Passion of Joan of Arc. These are groundbreaking movies that expand the cinema vocabulary. If Tommy Boy, which was produced by Lorne Michaels to appeal to a certain demographic, for example, people who watch Saturday Night Live, then the movie will fail to live up to these standards. Even if I evaluate Tommy Boy through the narrower lens of comedy movies, it will still fail. But here's the thing, I like Tommy Boy. Call it a guilty pleasure, but the movie makes me feel good, and on a Friday night, that's enough. First, there's a lot of funny moments in this movie, and while it'll be too tedious to list all of them, here's a few. Number 1, the fiery demonstration scene. This is a scene in which Tommy demonstrates what happens when a potential customer uses the leading brand, and at this end he sets a replica car on fire. Needless to say, the customer was not amused. Number 2, the deer scene. Tommy and Richard hit a deer, which they assume is dead, but alas, the deer is not dead and trashes Richard's car. Number 3, the fight scene. Tommy and Richard barely avoid a traffic accident caused as a result of Tommy leaving the oil can in the engine. The two's verbal argument becomes physical, which ends with Richard hitting Tommy with a 2x4. Number 4, the I suck as a salesman scene. In a particularly memorable scene, Tommy explains to a surly waitress why he sucks as a salesman. This is enough to cause the waitress to open the kitchen and put on some chicken wings. And it's basically the turning point of the movie. Spoiler alert. Number 5, the housekeeping scene. Richard, who just made a sale that puts him over the $500,000 mark, plays a prank on Tommy where he claims he's with housekeeping, but he's not. Number 6, the bees scene. In an effort to avoid a DUI, Tommy and Richard pretend that bees are attacking them. Number 7, the bathroom scene. Tommy and Richard pose as flight attendants to get to Chicago so they can meet Zelensky, but they have to change their uniforms to civilian clothes beforehand. Tommy enters the bathroom to change and basically destroys the bathroom. Number 8, the bank scene. In Chicago, Tommy and Richard see Zelensky enter an office building, but are unsure where he went. Tommy checks the bank and wants the attention of everyone. They promptly drop to the floor, assuming it's a robbery. Even the security guards surrender their guns. As I said, this list is by no means the exhaustive list. Those are just the funny scenes that come to mind when I think about Tommy Boy. And at the end of the day, when I can analyze this movie from a critical standpoint and deconstruct the meaning of the film in an intellectual manner, this movie is ultimately the sum total of some very funny moments. And for that, I like Tommy Boy. And while we're at it, we might as well look into the meaning of this movie. First, there's the dynamic between Tommy and Richard. On a surface level, they're like a modern-day Laurel and Hardy. But on a deeper level, although initially Richard resents Tommy, and while it's basically true that he had to pull himself up by his own bootstraps and learn a trade, and conversely Tommy, in spite of all his flaws, is more likable than Richard, they need each other. Tommy needs Richard because Richard is a type A personality who knows the specs for their brake pads like the back of his hand, and Richard needs Tommy because Tommy can sell the brake pads. He's not an entrepreneur, but he's learned enough to be a salesman. It's the reason most of us work for companies. Is as far as we are not entrepreneurs. While I may be reaching here, the movie may be a Misesian argument for capitalism as the foundation of a system of human cooperation. As individuals, everyone may be too flawed to fend for themselves, but by working for a company, everyone can focus on their true strengths and make money for the company. And hopefully make a paycheck at the end of that. There's one more that I can't help but feel this movie is a subtle indictment against college. Tommy was able to sell, although he didn't learn much in college. But is there any doubt that he was probably about as good as selling brake pads if he hadn't gone to college at all? In Bryan Caplan's The Case Against Education, Caplan argues that much of higher education is very inefficient and has only small effect in improving human capital. I'd say that Tommy Boy strengthens rather than weakens this view. So, in spite of the fact that Tommy Boy is no Citizen Kane and is not a classic, I'm willing to give it a high marks for comedic moments and grading it on the more lenient curve of Saturday Night Live inspired comedies. I also acknowledge that while not a classic, I'm still watching this movie after 28 years, and that's a positive. I give it an 8 out of 10. You can pick up the Tommy Boy DVD on Amazon for $5.59, and you can probably get the movie at $5 at Walmart, if not less. But I got the Holy Schnike Edition, which means that one of these discs has a bunch of extras. So I basically paid a premium for these extras. So the question is, How does the Holy Schnike Edition fare? On Disc 1, there's a commentary track with director Peter Segal that provides some insights into the making of this film. For example, that Segal's then 3-year-old daughter was a flower girl in the wedding scene of the movie. Disc 2 has extras, including featurettes, storyboards, and more. Overall, Tommy Boy, the Holy Schnike Edition is a good purchase for anyone who just wants a funny Farley Spade buddy comedy. To those who want to take a deeper look into this make of this very good but not classic movie, I rate it as a recommend. Remember, like and comment on this video, and hit the subscribe button so you can be kept up to date on new videos. As always, thanks for watching.